upon architect Arjun Basnet to begin with his presentation.
For the next 20 minutes. I'm Arjun Basnet, a graduate in Sustainable Architecture from the Norwegian Institute of Science and Technology. I would like to thank the organizing committee, India, ARCASIA, and JAIPUR for giving this wonderful hospitality. Thank you so much. To begin with my presentation, my topic is housing the rural hills and Nepal, linking indigenous knowledge to underlying culture and agrarian economy in the post-earthquake scenario. So, before going through my presentation, I'd like to briefly talk about the outline of the presentation. Going for the study, we had a team of 3 people, and we developed a certain background for the study. And we developed processes and methods before we actually went for the study. The study was conducted just after the earthquake. We derived study themes, and then we moved into the field to the sites where the earthquake was the most hit. And we discussed with the villagers and people around that study site, and then we analyzed the result that came. And with the analysis, we proposed a simple design so that could be used for the reconstruction of the houses that was demolished by the earthquake. And then I will conclude my presentation. So if you see the map of Nepal, maybe you all know about the earthquake that hit Nepal in 2015, 25th April. So the epicenter was in Gorkha, the district in the center of Nepal, and the part that was most affected was the eastern part of the epicenter. The magnitude of earthquake was 7.8. So if you see the data of casualties, around 9,000 people that died, and 2.5 times more the figure were injured. So if you see the rural houses, more than 600,000 houses were completely damaged, and half of this figure was partially damaged. So a lot of people in the village, they had confusion and dilemma about the use of local materials and technology, because they thought that after this incident, since a lot of houses they collapsed, they thought that these materials and this indigenous technology are not appropriate for a country like Nepal, because they did not withstand earthquake. So people, when they want reconstruction, they want something new. They wanted different materials rather than stone or mud, which was used in this area. So we, team of 3 people, we went to the field. It's near Kathmandu Valley, the capital city of Nepal. And I myself as an architect, and we have another friend, Bimal, he had a background in geography, and another friend, Madhav Gosal, a background in rural livelihood and rural development. So in this context, I would like to share my experience, how we did our research work and what had actually happened during the process of the research. We went to villages in Dolakha district, which is near to Kathmandu Valley. We also had another district for our study, like Ramachak and Sindipalchak. So as we were going, it was only after 16 days of the main earthquake, 25th April. So we went to our destination, we conducted the studies, and everything was fine. But the other day when we returned back, it was the 12th of May 2005. Again, there was another earthquake. If you remember, I mean, if you have heard in the news, there was another earthquake of 7.3 magnitude. So we are returning back to Kathmandu. We had a Tata Sumo jeep, and we had 8 people in the van, in the jeep. 3 of us and other 5 relatives, and one my father as well. So while we were returning back to Kathmandu, we had to ascend a hill, which was very steep, and then the rural road was very bumpy and very narrow, and the vehicle was shaking. We never realized the earthquake. So suddenly there were boulders, rocks falling up from the hills, and then there was all panic. Some of the rocks fell onto our vehicles. So 7 of us were lucky enough to save ourselves, But we lost our friend Madhav Basal. So I was sitting shoulder to shoulder with my friend when a rock fell on top of our vehicle. So with the impact of this rock, I got unconscious. I was bleeding on the head. So I have a scar as well. Lucky for me that I'm here for presenting you all. So as for my father, he rescued me after 12 minutes of the incident because there was all chaos, rocks were falling on the ground. And had it not been for my father, there would have been no one to rescue me until 1.5 hours where the security arrived. So we were taken to a safer place, and after a few hours, we were rescued and they lifted to Kathmandu and then admitted to the hospital. So lucky for me, I did not have any fatal internal injuries. And then after 3 weeks of my treatment and rest, I got back to my work. So if you see, the field we studied was District Ramachar, Dolaka and Sindhpalchar. They are near to Kathmandu, but they are geographically very challenging districts. Lots of hills and all that. So after we went to a place in Dolaka, we had discussions with the villagers what they want for reconstruction, what kind of home they want. So there were discussions about the number of stories of houses, whether the wall will have same material as before, load bearing like stones and mud mortar or different materials, and what do they want for the roofing material. And we are also talking about if the house would be only earthquake resistance or multi-hazard resistant. So fire prone, because of the fire, it's safer to have kitchens outside. It was their interest. And the most important part was the construction of the houses, because people in the rural areas, they are economically not sound, so they wanted the houses to be built as at a cost as minimum as possible. So that was the most important theme of the discussion. A lot of villagers, they wanted their house to be single-storied because they didn't want to destroy their houses or their families again with the earthquake. But if you see the villages, the rural areas of Kathmandu, the hilly areas of Kathmandu, they are very slow. So we didn't have appropriate land to have single-storied houses. We start constructing single-storied houses. There will be no land available for agriculture. So that was also not appropriate. But if you see the economic conditions and then cultural conditions in the villages, they normally have houses of 2 to 3 stories because they have space hierarchy in them. The ground floor has kitchen, the first floor has living areas, and the top floor they normally store their harvest. And the most important part of the rural architecture of Nepal is they use local materials. So in this case, it's stone and mortar with timber. And they also have a skirt roof, we call it skirt roof. Normally, before CGI came, the houses, they had thatch roof or stone slate roofs. But when the CGI came, that was more easier to use CGI because it was cheaper and easily available. So I will now show you some pictures about what did we identify during our field study in Sindhpalchar and in Dolaka. They are adjoining districts in the rural hills. So if you see the house in Sindhpalchar, we see the walls have gone apart. But in case of Dolaka, after the earthquake, we don't see much damage. So what we identified was that in Sindhpalchar district, we did not see any ties between the floors. We did not see any ties above the openings, the timber ties, which can be seen in the house in Dolaka district. This is an indigenous technology of constructing houses, but it was forgotten in Sindhpalchar. Because those generations who built this house, they did not experience any earthquake. So they were just forgotten. So the houses in Sindhpalchar, the walls went apart. Normally in rural hills of Nepal, there is a system of constructing 2 layers of walls, the inner wall and the outer wall. So it is bind together at intervals with a larger stone. And even in the corners you see in Dolaka, the house in Dolaka district, the corner stones are larger, they are 3 stones. So they bind the 2 walls together. But in case of Sindhpalchar, it does not. So it is all one plain wall and the corners were not bind together. That's why it all collapsed. So if I want to talk about the figures of death in Sindhpalchar district itself, it was the most hit during the earthquake, and more than 1,000 people died because of the collapse of the houses and the structures, the stones, the supporting structures of the houses and the roofs. So we're talking about the simple ties that was used in Dholka, which prevented the house from collapse. So you see the ties within the yellow mark, they have been used. But while I was discussing with my structural engineering friends, they told me that maybe the ties where they are overlapped is not suitable position, or the lap is not suitable. But even then, the houses have not been collapsed. They did not collapse during the earthquake. So because of this, a lot of lives were saved in Dholka, and most lives were gone in Singapore. So these are the images of Dholka district where larger through stones were used in the corners, which prevented the house from collapse. And in Singapore, it all went down. So after going to this field work and discussion with the fellow villagers, we came to some results. We're talking about the number of storied houses. I told you earlier, they wanted single storied houses, but that is actually not possible. They wanted, some wanted as houses, the number of storied as it used to be before, like 2 to 3 storied houses, because in our culture, we normally have, in the hilly areas, we normally have kitchen and living area in the ground floor, and then more private spaces like bedrooms in the upper floor, and then attic for harvest storage. Harvest storage in the attic because we could not prevent the crops, the harvest from damp. So that was taken all the way up to the attic. And because of this, while the building shook, it was heavier on the head and it collapsed. So it is wise to bring the storage down to the ground floor. And roofing materials, some of the villagers even told us that the house did not balance itself because of the heavy load of the tiles and all that, stone tiles, so they wanted CGI. The CGI is being used since several years, 2 to 3 decades, because they are cheaper nowadays and they are easily available in the market. And they wanted to build in ARCASIA. So we were convincing them with a lot of examples, but during the time of the earthquake, people did not want to build their houses with stones. They wanted some materials like bamboo, light materials like bamboo and timber. But during the reconstruction, a lot of houses have to be built. So timber and bamboo from that area is not enough. So the government does not have the programs to distribute bamboo and timber at the moment to the large construction. So the most important part, as I said earlier, is the cost of the house, because people cannot afford. The government is supporting around $2,900, and any expenditure beyond this, the owner or the people who are building the house will have to find themselves. That's why the cost has to be brought down to minimum to build the house. And another important part, the villagers, they wanted to build the kitchen outside the main house, because we also have lots of fire hazards during summers. Because of the fire in the kitchen, the whole house is burned down. They wanted it outside the main building. But after analyzing this, because of the geographical conditions of the hilly areas in Nepal, 2 to 3 story houses as is used to be before, traditionally is suitable because of the cultural aspects as well. And use of local materials is very important, because they will help to reduce the cost of construction, and also using local materials is very sustainable, and also they are climate adaptive, because we need to have a house comfortable. During summers, not much heated, and during winters we need to have a warm house. And then we're talking about the 3 stories of the houses. They are culturally and religiously very important, because I will talk about this after a few slides with the plans that we proposed. The construction materials, as I told you earlier, they wanted light materials. Most of the people, they were not aware about the vernacular architecture and their importance. So if they had money, they will definitely build into ARCASIA structures. Since they
Thank you, sir. It was a wonderful session, very informative. Now I'd like to call upon architect Hirohide Kobayashi from Japan to come on stage and begin with the presentation. Please welcome Mr. Kobayashi.
So it will be divided into two parts, reviving and redesigning of locally based architecture. So firstly, I would like to show you the reviving of locally based architecture and the reconstruction project of vernacular architecture. So we are researching on the wooden culture and the living environment in the local societies in Asian and the Pacific Islands so far, such as in Japan, Vietnam, Fiji, Thailand, and the Vanuatu Island. When we met the key persons in the field of research, the reconstruction project was organized together with the local people. So they recognized the significance of their own traditional housing and were motivated to revise it. So they are the key persons, and so they are also the teacher of mine to teach us a lot of information about the vernacular architecture. For example, the Mr. Tam is a commune leader in Hong Ha commune in Vietnam, said, "This is our house, so this is not my house." So which means, so the traditional community house was completed for the first time after 30 years of the Vietnam War. So they had to relocate it to the new villages and no chance to rebuild their own traditional houses. So I will show later this project. And the vernacular architecture expresses a local identity. However, it is gradually disappearing by the dissemination of the modernization and the market economy, even in such remote areas. So I often heard, so they thought maybe they are losing their traditional community house or traditional houses around the 1980s. Yeah. So the reconstruction project can provide the opportunity to re-evaluate their own building culture in such situations. So I would like to introduce the reconstruction project in Vietnam. So this is the Vietnam. And then we are doing the Japanese government funding project focusing on the support of livelihood and safety in disaster-prone areas in central Vietnam. So we selected the 3 villages. One of them is a Hong Ha commune in the mountainous village of Katu ethnic minorities. So originally we are supposed to make the evacuation center against the flash flood disaster. So this picture is the first meeting with the local people, with the commune leader and the former commune leader. So they didn't look happy to see our proposal. I was not so happy to be accepted. I found the reason why later. So they started to cut the bamboo material to demonstrate their traditional community house by showing the model, bamboo model. So we found their history when we see this model. So that's why we started to the reconstruction project working together. We started the material collection first, but of course it's sometimes difficult because the forest resources are protected by the government. So after the long negotiation to get a permission, so the local people collected the ironwood and also the bamboo and the palm leaves material. And the community cooperation also necessary. After the first ceremony in the construction site, the all villagers came together to erect the main structure of the community house. And in any process, so they needed to have a lot of community cooperation, and also in the completion ceremony, so they also came together to make a dance for the success of the construction. So in the process, all the villagers showed a lot of construction technique, like vine rope tying, the bamboo weaving, and the palm leaves roofing. And also design methodology is interesting. So this is our measurement and drawings, but they didn't use any drawings and also rulers. So do you think how they decide the dimension and the size of material? How do you think? So they use their body. It's an amazing intangible technique. So they use, by the interview survey, they demonstrate the 17 body-based units of measurement for design. For example, the pillar span should be this plus this. And the top height is decided by 4 times of the open arms. And the round length of the main pillar should be decided by 6 times of open arm, open hands. So it's amazing technique actually. So I think this is quite very important of the local culture for them. So about the significance of the reconstruction project, so the young villagers had many experiences of construction as well as the cultural activities. The construction project triggered the learning of traditional weaving and dancing and music. This is not a demonstration, this is not a performance for us. They continue up to now. So the construction of the community house can influence to the other kind of cultural activities. And also, recently the villagers opened a Wi-Fi cafe in the community house. Somebody don't like it, but I'm very happy to see it because this should be the new community space in modern context. So a record of all of the information in the construction process was published by the Vietnamese language to be a reference textbook for the future generation to explore the local culture. So about the lesson learned from the reconstruction project, vernacular architecture can be constructed and maintained by 3 elements of natural material, community cooperation, and indigenous knowledge. Maybe you can agree with this idea. And each of 3 elements is belonging to the natural, human, and intellectual resources. And also these 3 resources are interactive with each other. For example, the forest and the field around the village provide a sustenance to a community. And the local knowledge and technology are transferred from generation to generation in a community. And the forest resources are managed for sustainable use by the local knowledge. So these resources are linked together and supported together. And then, overviewing the 3 local resources, they exist in the local nature, society, and culture that summarize to be a local environment. So thus, the sustainability of vernacular architecture deeply depending on the local environment in its area. So if we can build a vernacular architecture, maybe local environment, maybe well maintenance. So this is a locally based timber building system. As you may know, the Japanese forest situation is very bad because the timber industry is now declined. The self-sufficient rate is only the 25% because of the less cost competition with imported material. And also this is a bamboo greenhouse project. the situation is very similar to the Japanese forest. So we don't use the bamboo material anymore. Getting very bad conditions like this. So that's why we develop to use the bamboo material by the development of the bamboo structured greenhouse with a self-building system. So this is a cycle of the bamboo forest and the material and the harvest of bamboo shoot. So this is a cycle in the past. So in this project, so more than 20 bamboo greenhouses already built by the local people who are very much conscious of the eco-friendly lifestyle, as well as, for example, the young farmers starting up the farming activities. So they didn't have any money, they just had energy and time. So last project is the Taneya agriculture project as an environmental linking architecture. So we set up the 3 scales of environmental harmony, like building scale, site scale, and the surrounding scale. Okay, so I would like to explain the main function of Taneya agriculture. The client is a Japanese confectionery company. The plants and the grasses are cultivated and then potted for the display to make a seasonal atmosphere in the shops. Can you understand? So for example, the upper suite is looking the warm atmosphere in the winter time. In the bottom is the looking the very cool, giving the atmosphere in the summertime. So in the Japanese confectionery, the seasonal atmosphere is very important. So that's why the company plan to build the cultivation factory and also the potting factory. This is the project. So maybe this project has some same framework of that. So this is a challenging and also the trial stage, but we believe the potential of locally based architecture in modern context can be important for our future.
Thank you, speakers, for a very interesting talk session. The presentations today made us more aware of the fact that the solutions of the problems created by mainstream architecture can be found in the vernacular architecture that uses not only the locally available materials and techniques, but is also a rich resource of knowledge unique to one's particular climate and culture. I am sure our audience must be ready with questions. So, I would now request all speakers and moderators to take their seats on the dais so that we can begin with the panel discussion. Please welcome our speakers with a big round of applause.
All right. Good afternoon. This is the second half of this session. We sort of look forward to answering some questions. I just want to lay out a few ground rules so that everyone is aware. Please stick to questions. It's all right to make a comment, but keep it brief, right? Questions is the key here, and the sense is that we will try and evoke a discussion around some common themes. Two things stood out for me in this session. Number one is the geographic breadth that we sort of walked through, right? We start, as you would recall, in Bangladesh, smaller settlements, climbed up the hills in Nepal, Himalaya, and then sort of traveled over to Vietnam and on to Japan. So in the spirit of ARCASIA, the session covered phenomenal geographic where. The second thing, which I think this panel did a great job, was to sort of offer case-based testimony, cases across scale, across building types, and across construction technologies. It's in a diverse range of contexts, including earthquake reconstruction and using locally based a palette in a very modern context, as we saw towards the end of the panel. So I would like to now open for questions. The best way is to perhaps raise your hand, and I'll direct the questions. State your name briefly, who you are, where you're coming from, and the panelists to whom you direct that question. Or you could say, hey, the question is for the entire panel, and then we'll take it as we go along. Questions for you guys as well, but let's begin with you. What problems did you face or you encountered during your research adapting some of these very natural and context-based building technologies and solutions to modern design? We talked about how this process happened, but what were the shortcomings or difficulties, challenges that you encountered?
Thank you for your question. To implement the locally based architecture, we have many restrictions and barriers actually. But I feel it's getting more people who are conscious of the eco-friendly lifestyle, and also the caring about the global environmental issues in their life. So if I propose, for example, the bamboo greenhouse project 10 years ago, maybe very few people can understand. But I found that many people who are interested in this project and agree with the idea of that. So that's why I feel the potential of the locally based architecture in our modern and future societies. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
In the past case, for example, if you want to have a house in a rural area, normally what those people who reside in houses, they normally think that their houses are not houses. They're like temporary receptors, like huts and all. They see a concrete building and they want to have a house like that. And because of this, those people who construct traditional houses, they have been off jobs, let's say. And more people who construct houses in concrete, they are up. So even if you want to have, let's say, a house built in a traditional way, with engineers technology in a rural setting, it's very difficult to find workers to build the houses. So because of this, the house becomes expensive. Building concrete is becomes cheaper, and if you do this, it becomes expensive. But if there is a policy now, for example, in the rural setting, you have to build in a traditional way, and if you do materials, and then and if the people are empowered, there is more training, machines and all, develop in that way, then it works out. And it used to be.
Well, I'd like to sort of mention the same thing, that aspiration change of materials is a big difficulty we face in rural areas, because there are people who've been making their houses for years, from huts to now houses of bricks, from tin shades to now concrete roofs. So this change has changed very dynamically in recent years because of this aspiration change, and that aspiration change has come from this lack of awareness that local materials or local techniques actually stand better chance, not just the traditional mainstream materials.
Okay. Any questions from the audience? Wow, that really means we had very clear and explicit presentations, and panelists sort of answered, right? Most of the questions you might have had anticipating where it was going. But to my mind, it raises, based on the comments, so we can carry on with the conversation we are having, I guess, is the conflict between economies, right? The sense that people have aspiration, especially in the developing context, of something that's more permanent, or might be identified with having better financial resources at the end of an individual or a household, vis-a-vis in the case of a developed country like Japan. And that's something I wanted to play out. Was cost a consideration in the case that you showed with the one bamboo house? And if it was, how did it shape the design process?
Okay. We Japanese are now living in the developed countries. But I learned a lot from my project in other Asian countries and Pacific Islands. So this is very important for us. For example, we are living in Japan. We are living in the house which prepared by the company. But it's very amazing. So they are building by themselves. This is a very amazing event for me. So maybe the locality is something like this. So we already forget many things by the modernization and the market economy. But, for example, in Vietnam, so 10 years ago, when I first time to visit the commune, the village, so they had their very traditional lifestyle, but after 10 years, so they are also influenced by the market economy. The young people like to have the iPhone, motorbike, and also the audio equipment.
Well, I went through the field study in our area, in the regions. The materials, the construction systems, and the build form, they were all more friendly with this situation. We were friendly with the climate context. They were more climate adapted, so it is not that hot during the summers and not that cold in the winter because the water thick. The roof, even though they were in CGI, those people who could afford, they bought bamboo mats and insulated the CGI seats. So it was that kind of space. So you feel comfortable while you stay in that space. But if you see a concrete house, it's going to be very hot in summer and very cold in winters. And sadly, there are houses erupting now with concrete and all that. So we are lobbying, I myself and our community, will lobby for having the local identity. It's the rebuilding or the reconstruction is going to take place.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Laksh Jain. I'm a student. And my question is, in today's time, we are having high-rise architecture all over. So how is it possible to incorporate vernacular architecture in this scenario? Because let's take a case of our city of JAIPUR, where we have courtyard plannings for the residences. But certainly it's not possible when you go higher, or the locally available stone, which is affordable and environmentally eco-friendly product for there. But you cannot go to a certain height. So is it a limitation of vernacular architecture, or there are some new techniques that we need to develop to pass this problem?
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for your question. So, my idea of the vernacular architecture is supported by the three local resources I showed in my presentation. So, in this context, it's very difficult to apply the vernacular architecture to the high-rise building or the building in the city. But of course, as you said, so it's very possible to make the eco-friendly high-rise building, I think. But this is a little bit different from my viewpoint, because they are not only the material, but also the people's involvement is quite necessary for the vernacular architecture. This is my viewpoint, and yeah.
of these as discrete systems and components. Some of them would work in certain contexts, as in high-rise, and some would not, right? And then the trick is to figure out what works, and that's why the research which all the three panelists did, I think, was very clear. And then you choose what works, and you take that sort of, not as a best practice, but perhaps as the most well-suited or fitted solution out of that case for other cases.
Thank you for your question.
Thanks. I'm a lecturer from Hanoi University Architecture. So I have a question. You know, the vernacular architecture is very interesting and very important. So what is the best way to protect it, to preserve it, and most importantly to spread it and inspire new generation to continue the change? For example, you talk about local people measurement using own body system. So how to take note to store this knowledge? If we write in a book, maybe we end up in a library. So how to teach the local young people to continue this tradition?
Ruben, let's start with you and then we go.
Thank you for your question. With local people and local technologies, usually they spread among generations through their beliefs and traditions and rituals. But we just need to enhance them and sort of emphasize the fact that these are important knowledge that they have. Because lack of their awareness, they think these are not important enough to pass on to the next generation. So raising awareness about that is more important firstly, and then to protect or to preserve vernacular architecture, of course. What we can do is to make it sustainable, as I was talking about social sustainability. We should try to follow the stories, the core, which is the core of these vernacular architectures, and spread them among the rural people, just like they would recall, or they can always remember with local songs or poems like that. That's my take on it.
So I had an interesting experience in the final meeting of the Reconstruction project in Vietnam. So in the final meeting, the old villagers emphasized the reconstruction perfectly by the traditional way. But the young people emphasized that at least the column should be concrete, or such a roof is looking poor. So maybe for them, the concrete or modern material is very important to express the symbol of richness, rich lifestyle. But after the completion of the community house, so they found the significance of their own culture. So they learned through the construction process. So maybe they cannot touch this experience in the ethnic museum.
To the answer to the question that the gentleman asked him, I feel that we don't need to use the word conservation for the rural and rural technologies. I would rather say we should, one is that first the documentation of these technologies that should be taken up on a very large, in a very mega scale through the country, or especially in India, suppose I'm talking about, or Nepal. And then we should be teaching these materials in the architectural schools and the design schools. There could be the fraternity like ARCASIA or IIA, other these kind of agencies which can help to conduct workshops throughout the place with these kind of materials. And then the research funds probably would flow in, and we could do research with the same materials and see that they are also used in, not stone of course, because stone in the same way, like with the weight cannot be used on a high rise, but there are many other materials which can be used, traditional materials, which are going to be mainstream materials probably later. Focus on mainstreaming these materials rather than trying to call them alternatives any further, if we really want to see them in the mainstream. I mean, this is my feeling. Thank you.
Right. IIA immediate past president, architect Prakash Deshmukh, to felicitate the speakers. Please welcome on stage Mr. Prakash Deshmukh. Kobayashi from Japan.
Thank you very much.
Architect Rubaya Nazareen from Bangladesh. Architect Arjun Basnet from Nepal. And a moderator, Architect Sanjeev Vidyarthi. Thank you, sir.
Listening to this wonderful panel discussion around rural and vernacular typologies and building practices.
Thank you all. I would also like to thank our hall sponsor, Brabant and Craft, and I would request you all to join us for high tea.
Thank you.
Thank you.